I was overwhelmed. I lost control of emotion. I didn't know what I was feeling, what I was thinking. I wasn't thinking.
Nestled within the valleys of southeastern New Mexico, Hondo is a quiet and unassuming community where the Rio Hondo weaves through canyons and meadows. It was founded in the 1800s as a waypoint for ranchers and settlers. Amidst the idyllic setting lies Chavez Canyon Ranch, a sprawling property nestled deep within the rugged hills. With its weathered barns, expansive pastures and rolling hills, the ranch painted a picture of pastoral simplicity. But on a warm summer evening in 2004, the serenity of Chavez Canyon Ranch was shattered. The owner, Sam Donaldson, had just returned from a weekend away with his wife and found the ranch eerily silent. His ranch hand was noticeably absent, and so was his family. As Sam approached their ranch house, the pungent metallic scent of blood filled the air. What had transpired at Chavez Canyon Ranch over the weekend would raise complex questions about self-defense, unchecked cycles of child abuse, and the breaking point of human spirit. Cody Posey's life was one marked by hardship from the very beginning. Born on the 9th of October 1989 in New Mexico to Carla Brust and Paul Posey, Cody's early years were anything but stable. The marriage between Carla and Paul was tumultuous and short-lived. By the time Cody was just 11 months old, his mother had left the relationship, taking her infant son with her to live with her sister, Corliss Cleese. By 1992, Carla and Paul's divorce was finalised. For a time they shared custody of Cody, but their arrangement unfolded against a backdrop of further family turmoil. In 1995, Cody's grandparents, Jay and Linda Posey, were found dead on their ranch southwest of Roswell. The cause was devastating, a murder-suicide that sent shockwaves through the family, leaving a lingering cloud of sorrow over Cody's already unstable childhood. 3 years later, in 1998, Paul remarried. He became part of a shifting family dynamic that included his new wife, Tyrone, and her daughter from her previous marriage, Marilia. During this time, Carla continued to be Cody's primary caregiver. In April of 2000, she was granted sole custody of her son. Paul, by agreement, relinquished his parental rights. With a new family to focus on, this arrangement suited Paul, who was now free from child support obligations. But tragedy, which was a constant shadow in Cody's life, loomed once more. Just 3 months after Carla gained full custody, disaster struck. In July of 2000, Carla was killed in a car accident when her new husband, Russell Brust, fell asleep at the wheel. The pickup truck flipped, ejecting Carla from the vehicle. 10-year-old Cody, who survived the crash, was forced to witness the horrifying aftermath. He watched helplessly as his mother lay dying on the side of the road, an image that would haunt him for years to come. Racked with guilt, he blamed himself for his mother's death, confiding later to his aunt Corliss, "I killed my mum. I wanted to sit in front with my new dad, and that's why she's dead." The fallout from Carla's death added another layer of grief and upheaval to Cody's life. Despite having relinquished custody years earlier, Paul showed up at Carla's memorial service flanked by police officers, demanding custody of his son. Any hope that Cody might have had of remaining connected to his mother's side of the family was quickly extinguished. Paul forbade all contact between his son and his extended family. Letters sent to Cody by relatives were intercepted and returned, severing what few ties he had left to his mother's memory. For his aunt Corliss, the loss of contact with Cody was unbearable. She remembered Paul's actions with the bitterness born from love and helplessness. She stated, "It was about control. He referred to him as his property. He said, 'I own him. He's mine.'" Cody Posey moved in with his father, Paul, his stepmother, Tyrone, and his stepsister, Marilia, after the sudden loss of his mother. Their situation shifted in October of 2001, when Paul was hired by NBC newsman Sam Donaldson to manage operations at his expansive ranch in Hondo, New Mexico. The 7,000-acre Chavez Canyon Ranch sprawled across rolling pasture land a remote yet picturesque setting roughly 120 miles northeast of La Cruces. The family settled into life on the ranch, and Cody helped his father each day with ranching tasks. Then came the 4th of July weekend in 2004. Sam Donaldson and his wife left for Santa Fe to celebrate her birthday, leaving the Posey family alone at the ranch. By all appearances, it was a routine weekend, a quiet reprieve in the middle of summer. When the Donaldsons returned on Monday evening, nothing seemed amiss. It was late and the darkness cloaked any immediate signs of trouble. By Tuesday morning, however, unease began to creep in. Sam expected to see Paul or one of the family members tending to their daily chores, but by the end of the day he hadn't crossed paths with anyone. Concerned, he wondered if they had left on an impromptu trip. That evening, curiosity turned to apprehension. Sam walked over to the family's ranch house to check on them. As he stepped onto the porch, something unusual caught his eye under the dim light. A dark, congealed substance lay on the ground, a substance that became unmistakable as he drew closer. It was blood. Beside it lay a cap and a pair of eyeglasses. With growing dread, Sam reached the front door and found it unlocked. He hesitated, then slowly pushed it open and called out for the family. Silence greeted him. Venturing inside, he moved cautiously through the house until he reached the kitchen, where the unsettling discovery deepened. A puddle of congealed blood marred the floor, streaked with drag marks leading out of the room. Overcome with fear and unsure if danger lurked nearby, Sam retreated from the home and called 911. Detectives arrived shortly after 4:30 p.m, their flashlights cutting through the dimness as they approached the home. Inside, they found a scene that spoke of violence, but it yielded no bodies. Upstairs, however, they uncovered a chilling clue in Cody's bedroom. A handwritten note scrawled with the words, "Sorry, coppers, I needed the kid to do the dirty work." The message raised more questions than answers. Where was the Posey family? And more urgently, where was Cody? As forensic experts processed the scene, one detective noticed something suspicious outside. Blood was smeared in the bucket of a backhoe parked nearby. The vehicle appeared recently driven, its tracks leading away from the home. Following them, the detective arrived at a remote area of the ranch near the bluffs. The trail stopped at a disturbed patch of earth beneath a buzzing manure pile. Detective Tom Sullivan illuminated the area with his flashlight. Using a stick, he sifted through the dirt and manure. Then came the grim discovery: a human body partially buried. As more of the pile was excavated, 2 additional bodies were discovered. Paul, Tyrone, and 13-year-old Marilia had been shot to death, their remains concealed beneath the manure. The scene was horrifying, yet one question loomed over the detectives. Where was 14-year-old Cody? As the gruesome crime scene unfolded at the ranch, Cody was about 15 miles away, playing basketball with his friends Leo and Gilbert Salcido. He had arrived at their home 2 days earlier, asking to stay for a couple of days. Cody explained that his parents had been arguing and he needed some space. Initially quiet and reserved, Cody's demeanour shifted dramatically over those 2 days. Faustino, Leo and Gilbert's father, later remarked on the transformation he observed. Before, he was real quiet and drawn away. He talked to you, but he wouldn't carry on a conversation. Monday, you couldn't keep him quiet. He told me these were the happiest 2 days he'd had in his life. He thanked me for letting him stay. The timing of Cody's sudden cheerfulness raised red flags for detectives, but they were already suspicious of Cody for another reason. The note that was found in his bedroom matched his handwriting. On the 7th of July, detectives arrived at the Salcido home, arresting Cody on 3 counts of murder and 4 counts of tampering with evidence. In a press conference, District Attorney Scott Key announced that Cody would be charged as a juvenile, but noted that an adult penalty could still be pursued if he were convicted. He admitted the rarity of such a case, stating, "We've never seen a triple murder, and the circumstances of a juvenile committing a crime against family members hasn't been experienced here. The murder sent shockwaves through the community and beyond. News coverage delved into the lives of the Posey family, trying to piece together how such a tragedy could unfold. Sam Donaldson described the Poseys as an all-American ranch family during an interview with Good Morning America. However, his comments about Paul Posey struck some as unsettling. Paul was a little hard on his son, but that's the way you raise a young man. I never saw Paul raise his voice or his hand in anger to his son. He clearly expected a lot of him, he said. As the investigation progressed, it became evident that life inside the Posey household was far from idyllic. When detectives apprehended Cody, he was taken to the police station for questioning. 2 adults, Faustino and his brother Eli, accompanied him, determined to protect the boy they believed could not possibly be involved in such a horrific crime. The men quickly grew uneasy about the interrogation, insisting that Cody should have a lawyer present. Detectives dismissed their concerns with a curt response. He's not being interrogated. Cody initially appeared calm, but as he sat before the detectives, his composure cracked. Tears welled up in his eyes and he made a cryptic, chilling statement. I know what I did was wrong, but the world is better without my father. Moments later, Cody confessed. The note discovered at the ranch house, he revealed, was his attempt to mislead detectives. In his own words, I didn't want to go to jail for life. Cody then began to share the dark truth about life in the Posey household, painting a picture of a home that was ruled by strict discipline and unchecked abuse. He described his father Paul as a perfectionist whose strictness often turned to cruelty. Cody said that the abuse was relentless, both physical and emotional. He stated, "We fought every single day," adding that his father struck him in about 1 out of every 3 arguments. The blows weren't minor either. They left bruises, split lips, and black eyes. He said of his father, he was hard-going, sometimes mean, rough, real up, real strict, real old-fashioned. Tyrone, he said, was no better. He alleged that she often joined in on the abuse, berating and punishing him for failing to meet their impossibly high standards. Detectives listened intently as Cody recounted the final breaking point, the culmination of years of violence and despair that led him to commit the unthinkable. Cody's account of the horrific events leading up to the murders painted a chilling picture of abuse and desperation. According to him, the breaking point came the night before the murders. He recalled being summoned to the master bedroom by his father, Paul. Inside, Tyrone was sitting on the bed naked. What Paul demanded next shattered any semblance of normalcy Cody had hoped to cling to. He ordered Cody to have sex with his wife, Tyrone. When Cody refused, Tyrone attempted to coerce him, saying, "Well, we're not related. We're not blood. Come do it." Cody could only shake his head in disbelief. He later recounted, "My dad and her wouldn't have sex or something like that, and they were trying to do something to me." Paul's refusal to accept his son's defiance turned violent. Enraged, he grabbed a piece of metal, heated it with a butane torch, and pressed it against Cody's shoulder, burning him. Terrified and in pain, Cody fled the bedroom, trying to push the incident from his mind. But when dawn broke, the nightmare only continued. The next morning, Paul erupted into another fit of rage. This time, he berated Cody for not cleaning the horse stalls quickly enough. Their argument escalated rapidly. Paul struck Cody several times before snarling, "If it wasn't illegal, I'd knock your head off." Cody said this moment crystallized his decision. Years of abuse had worn him down, and now he had reached his limit. This wasn't the first instance of violence that weekend, Cody said. Paul had already hit him with a shovel and tried to strangle him in a separate incident. The compounded horrors finally drove Cody to act. Fueled by a mixture of anger, fear, and despair, he went into the barn where he found Marilea's saddlebag. Inside was a .38 caliber revolver she used for shooting snakes. Cody emptied the weapon of its snake shot and reloaded it with more lethal bullets. Determined and numb, Cody entered the ranch house. Tyrone was in the living room, engrossed in a book. Without hesitation, Cody raised the revolver and fired twice, striking his stepmother in the head. The sound of gunfire echoed through the house, drawing Paul from outside. As he rushed in, Cody turned the gun on him and fired once, hitting him in the head. Marilia, hearing the commotion, followed close behind. Cody said he knew that she would call police, and in his frenzied state, he decided she had to die as well. He aimed and fired at her head. The first shot didn't kill her. Marilia fell, still moving, so Cody fired again, this time ensuring her death. With all 3 family members dead, Cody turned his attention to hiding their bodies. He retrieved the ranch's backhoe, loaded the corpses into its bucket, and drove to a remote part of the property near the bluffs. He said that the ground was too hard to bury them, so he hastily concealed them beneath the manure pile. Returning to his bedroom, Cody stripped off his bloody clothing and left the ranch. He made his way to Leo and Gilbert's home, where he spent the next 2 days. Towards the end of the confession, Cody expressed regret, a glimmer of the boy beneath the burden of his actions. He said, "I regret it. It was the wrong thing to do. I miss him, even though they were mean." As the grisly details of the Posey family murders dominated headlines, a wave of voices emerged in Cody's defence. Family members, friends, and members of the community painted a chilling portrait of a boy pushed to his breaking point by years of unchecked abuse. His aunt, Corliss, spoke about the suffering her nephew endured. Something caused Cody to snap because that's not who he is. You can only take abuse for so long, she said. Corliss revealed that Cody had confided in her on multiple occasions about the physical and verbal abuse he suffered at his father's hands. The records backed her up. New Mexico's Children, Youth and Families Division had long been aware of Paul Posey's violent tendencies. In 1997, he had been ordered to take anger management and parenting classes. One particularly horrifying incident from Cody's infancy was well documented. Paul had whipped his son with a belt across the face and head because Cody, who was still a toddler, hadn't moved out of his way fast enough. This was the final straw for Cody's mother, Carla, who left Paul at that stage and moved in with her sister. But even after leaving Paul, Cody couldn't escape his father's wrath. Back in 1994, while Carla was serving in the Navy, Cody, who was then just 4 years old, was temporarily sent to live with Paul and his second wife, Sandy. Sandy later described the nightmare of trying to shield Cody from Paul's rage. She recollected. He would yank him out of the bed, the bunk bed on the top, yank him off onto the floor. One evening, Sandy came home to a particularly horrifying scene. Paul beating 7-year-old Cody with a board. Sandy tried to intervene, but the damage had already been done. When Carla returned from leave, she was horrified to see the bruises covering her son. She called the police, leading to an investigation by Child Protective Services. However, instead of removing Cody from harm, authorities ordered Paul to attend anger management classes and parenting workshops. They were measures that proved grossly inadequate. Even after Carla's death in 2000, when Paul claimed custody of Cody at her memorial, the signs of abuse were evident. Cody had pleaded with a police officer, begging not to be taken by his father, who he accused of beating, mistreating and belittling him. "I don't want to go with him," Cody said, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. Paul was allowed to take Cody home, leaving Corliss and the rest of the family powerless. Corliss lamented, "I hollered and it just fell on deaf ears. They just didn't want to believe it because Paul was a good old boy." In the years that followed, Cody's cries for help continued to be ignored. Corliss and other relatives lost all contact with him. Meanwhile, Paul ensured that any letters from family members were returned unopened. It wasn't just family who saw the signs of abuse either. Cody's friends, Leo and Gilbert, told detectives that Cody often came to school with black eyes and bruises. At first, he would lie, blaming the injuries on accidents like mishaps of softball. Eventually, he admitted the truth. His father hit him. The boy's father, Faustino, later expressed regret for not stepping in sooner. "It just hurts to know that this kid went through what he did. I just wished he'd asked me for help," he said. Even workers on the ranch noticed Paul's mistreatment of his son. Slim Britton, one of the ranch hands, described seeing Paul screaming and beating Cody on multiple occasions. On one particularly cruel day, Paul rode up behind Cody on horseback and whipped him across the back with a rope. Slim somberly added, "I never saw a hand laid on him in love." Other ranch workers and community members shared similar observations. Alvira Lerma, whose husband worked for Paul, said she often noticed cigarette burns on Cody's arms. She also remembered telling her husband, "I feel like something's going to happen to that family. Either Cody's going to kill Paul or Paul's going to kill Cody." Just 3 months later, Alvira's grim prediction came true. Paul, Tyrone and Marilia were dead, and Cody was behind bars. The tragedy that had unfolded was no longer a mystery, but its roots ran deep into a system that had failed to protect a vulnerable child. As Cody sat in custody, many couldn't help but wonder, was he a murderer, or was he a boy who had just simply been failed one too many times? As the Posey family tragedy continued to unfold in the public eye, Cody made his first court appearance where he faced 3 counts of murder and 4 counts of evidence tampering. His defence attorney Gary Mitchell entered a not guilty plea on his behalf, emphasising the profound trauma that led to the tragic events. Outside the courtroom, Mitchell stated, "We're going to spend an awful lot of time finding out what happened and figuring out what caused all of this. I suspect there's going to be a lot of questions as to why people ignored the signs that should have told them we had a young man desperately fighting for his sanity and help." Cody's family rallied behind him, with his aunt Corliss spearheading efforts to bring attention to the case and the broader issue of child abuse. She announced plans for a rally to raise awareness, stating, "This isn't just about a young man who killed 3 of his family members. This is about an extremely abused young man. This is about child abuse and where it can lead." Perhaps one of the most surprising voices to support Cody was Jake Schmid, the biological father of Marilia. Despite the immense loss of his daughter, Jake placed blame squarely on Paul and Tyrone. He remarked, "Cody doesn't need to be punished for this. He didn't do it. Paul and Tyrone did this. They created Cody and made him the weapon that caused their deaths and my daughter's." While Cody remained in custody, the Posey family members were laid to rest. Paul and Tyrone shared a funeral service at the First Baptist Church, while Marilia's service took place the next day. During her eulogy, Jake described Marilia as a kind and compassionate soul with a deep love for animals. He shared her dream of becoming a veterinarian, stating, "She had a feeling for the animals. She was a great person. She was going to be somebody. I'm sure of it." Marilia was laid to rest beside her grandfather's plot in the Hondo Valley. Then on the 31st of July, a rally for Cody took place in Roswell. Survivors of child abuse, including Scott Drum, spoke passionately about the lasting impact of violence. In a chilling demonstration, Drum slammed a shovel onto a brick, wrapped in a pillowcase, and bluntly asked, "Imagine what that would do to a child." Corliss also addressed the crowd, speaking to the complexity of Cody's actions when she said, "This wasn't a cold-blooded act, and it wasn't out of malice. It was for survival. I don't condone it, but I don't condemn it." Attendees were encouraged to sign a petition advocating for Cody to be tried in juvenile court, citing the mitigating circumstances of his extensive abuse. For those who attended, the rally wasn't just about Cody. It was a call to action to address systemic failures and prevent future tragedies. In October of 2005, District Attorney Scott Key made a pivotal announcement. Cody Posey would be tried as a juvenile rather than as an adult. This decision significantly altered the potential sentencing Cody could face if convicted, sparing him from life imprisonment. Public developments in the case remained sparse up until nearly a year later, in September of 2006, when prosecutors filed the motion to move the trial venue. Citing unprecedented media coverage and widespread accounts of Cody's alleged abuse, they argued that finding an impartial jury in Lincoln County would be impossible. It was an unusual move, as defence attorneys are typically the ones seeking a change of venue in cases with significant pre-trial publicity. Cody's defence attorney Gary Mitchell criticised the motion, suggesting that prosecutors sought to distance the case from the community familiar with the Posey family dynamic and sympathetic to Cody's circumstances. The state seeks a change of venue so they will not have to try this case before people that understand what Cody had to go through. But I honestly believe it's not going to matter where we go. They don't think they can get a conviction in Lincoln County. That's nothing fancy, that's just the way it is. Despite Mitchell's objections, the motion was granted, and the trial was relocated to Otero County. Mitchell voiced his frustration, stating, "The state tried to do the politically correct thing by saying they were really concerned whether Cody could get a fair trial, which is what I term prosecutorial bullshit." The jury was scheduled to begin in January of 2006, with jury selection kicking off in early January. By January 14th, a jury of 16 members, 6 men and 10 women, including 4 alternatives, was seated and the trial was ready to commence. As the trial began, 2 central themes emerged: Cody Posey as a victim and Cody Posey as a planner. The defence sought to demonstrate that Cody was a traumatised teenager who snapped after enduring years of severe abuse at the hands of his father and stepmother. They aimed to paint a picture of a boy pushed to the brink by circumstances beyond his control. The prosecution, on the other hand, aimed to argue that the murders were premeditated, pointing to Cody's actions after the killings, his concealment of the bodies and attempts to mislead investigators as evidence of calculated intent. With both sides prepared to present their cases, the stage was set for a trial that would deeply examine the devastating impact of abuse and the fine line between impulse and intention. On the 18th of January 2006, Cody Posey was escorted into the courtroom and took his place alongside his defence team. During opening statements, prosecutor Sandra Grisham asserted that Cody had acted deliberately when he made the unbelievably vicious, selfish decision to kill Paul, Tyrone and Marilia. She emphasised that his actions were calculated, pointing out that he tried to mislead investigators by hiding the bodies and the murder weapon. Furthermore, she argued that Cody had staged a break-in by breaking a window with a shovel and leaving behind a handwritten note purported to be from the killer. Grisham bluntly stated, "Their world became a pile of manure in which he buried them." The prosecution also revealed that a 16-year-old witness claimed that Cody had expressed hatred for Paul and Tyrone and had spoken about wanting to kill them in the past. In contrast, the defence did not dispute that Cody had killed his family, but argued that he had acted in self-defence. Defence attorney Gary Mitchell explained that this was not a typical self-defence case, but one where Cody had erupted in what the defence described as a spasm of violence triggered by years of verbal, physical, emotional and sexual abuse. Mitchell reserved his full opening statement for the start of the defence's case, but he told the media during a break. Finally, he came to a breaking point. In an extremely emotional time for the child, he reacted. It was in self-defence. He didn't know how to solve the problem, and at the time, he knew the abuse was not only escalating, but would continue to escalate. The prosecution's first witness was Sam Donaldson, who recounted the discovery of the gruesome scene at the family's ranch house. On the 911 call, which was played for the jury, he told the operator, "I cannot find my ranch manager, but I found a great deal of congealed blood." The jury then watched the 100-minute video of Cody's confession. As the recording played, Cody rested his head on his left hand and stared at the defence table. Next, the prosecution called Brian Basham, Tyrone's brother, who testified about an April 2004 visit to the ranch, during which Cody mentioned visiting crime websites and researching the Menendez brothers case. The prosecution implied that Cody might have drawn inspiration to fabricate his claims of abuse from this case, despite numerous corroborating accounts from people who witnessed the abuse that Cody endured. The prosecution's case was brief, as it was undisputed that Cody had committed the killings. After they rested, defence attorney Gary Mitchell opened the defence's case by presenting evidence that painted a harrowing picture of Cody's life. An analysis of Paul's computer revealed searches for incest on pornographic websites, which the prosecution had unsuccessfully tried to exclude from evidence. The defence also presented photographs of 3 burns on Cody's arms, which they claimed were inflicted by Paul using a hot iron on the night of 4th of July, in an effort to coerce Cody into having sex with his stepmother. Mitchell passionately addressed the jury, stating, "In the end, ladies and gentlemen, we ask, how much do we ask of a child? How much do we demand he tolerate? And do we allow him to fight back?" He went on to reveal that Cody had suffered from depression and post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of his traumatic upbringing, and that he had been prescribed antidepressants. The courtroom fell to a hushed silence as Cody Posey took the stand to testify in his own defence. In a quiet voice, he began by sharing a heartbreaking longing for a normal family life. He said, "I wanted a family. I've seen families on TV. I wanted to be the kid that my dad said, 'Look, that's my kid.' I wanted to be appreciated. I wanted to be liked and loved. That's all I was wanting." Instead, he recounted a childhood marred by abuse at the hands of his father and stepmother. Cody described a horrifying catalogue of physical, emotional and sexual abuse that included being choked by his father to the point of near unconsciousness, shocked with an electric cattle prod while he slept, and hit in the face with a fly swatter. He also recalled having hay bales thrown at him and being forced by his father to shoot a puppy given to him by a friend. Cody shared other instances of abuse, such as being dragged by a rope behind a horse for 20 feet after making a mistake during ranch work and having his dinner poured over his head because he didn't finish it. He told the jury, "I've lost count of getting punched, slapped, kicked. That was a normal thing around my household. I can remember getting hit in practically every part of my body." He revealed that his father would frequently belittle him, once saying, "I should have tied you up in a sack of rocks and thrown you in a river, like you do with puppies." Cody described the isolation he endured while the family lived in Weed, where he was forbidden from socialising and forced to spend all of his time alone in his bedroom. Speaking of his father, he said, "I wanted to love him and I wanted him to love me back, but it was hard to please him. There was really no pleasing him." The focus then shifted to the events surrounding the murders. Cody described feeling overwhelmed and losing control.
I was overwhelmed. I lost control of emotion. I didn't know what I was feeling, what I was thinking. I wasn't thinking.
He recounted the horrifying incident the night before the murders, when Paul and Tyrone attempted to force him to have sex with his stepmother. Paul ordered his son to strip naked, and when he refused, he was burned on the shoulder with the heated metal from a butane torch. Tyrone, who was naked on the bed, pulled Cody's head to her chest, and in a desperate attempt to escape, Cody said that he bit her. In retaliation, Paul burned him a second time. Cody fled to his bedroom and cowered in a corner. "I felt disgusting, dirty. I just felt like I was lying and rolling in dirt," he said. The next morning, Paul punched him for not completing a chore to his satisfaction, triggering what Cody described as a complete mental break. "I more or less lost my mind," he said. After his testimony, Cody stepped down, and the defence called witnesses who corroborated the abuse that he had endured. Isabel Vasquez testified that she had witnessed Paul hitting Cody with a pipe in the stomach and shoulder, striking his hand with a metal hay hook, and even hitting him with a rock and horse reins for not performing tasks to his satisfaction. Clint Skeen, a former classmate who worked at the ranch, described Paul's constant screaming and insults, saying, "When Cody was around me, he was happy, and when Paul entered the picture, he was like a whipped dog. He put his head down and didn't know how to act." Another worker, Slim Britton, testified that Cody was often forced to work outside without any food or water. Sherry Gensler recounted an emotional moment at Cody's mother's funeral when he begged a police officer, "Don't let him take me, he beats me." Emily Nutt, a Sunday school teacher, contrasted how Paul and Tyrone showered Marilee with affection while treating Cody with disdain. She testified, "They were always so loving on her. touching her, hugging her, telling her how smart she was, how beautiful. They never said anything kind to him or that he was doing well. In total, the defence presented testimony from 17 eyewitnesses who described Paul's abusive behaviour towards Cody. Additionally, 2 of Marilea's school friends testified that she would spy on Cody at school and report back to Paul and Tyrone, who would then punish him for perceived infractions. The jury then heard chilling testimony from Joe Burchett, a computer programmer who had analysed the computer from the master bedroom of the Posey home. His findings were disturbing. Burchett revealed that somebody in the household had visited thousands of pornographic websites, many of which focused on incest. The search terms he recovered painted a deeply unsettling picture. Father-daughter incest, free incest stories, free rape galleries, and even mother and very young son incest. Burchett testified that all of these searches occurred during times when Cody was confirmed to be at school, definitively ruling him out as the person responsible. He had recovered a staggering list of approximately 4,000 websites visited from the computer, with nearly half being of pornographic nature. While most of the data had been erased before his analysis, Burchett was able to recover 187 pages of incest-related material, leaving the courtroom in a stunned silence. The prosecution's narrative continued to unravel as the defence called psychologist Dr. Christine Johnson to the stand. Dr. Johnson explained that Cody had been diagnosed with several psychological disorders, all of which could be traced back to the abusive environment he had endured. She described Cody as an intelligent but emotionally fragile boy, desperate for his father's approval. She told the jury, "I believe that his emotional condition at the time would have impaired or gotten in the way of his ability to reason. I believe that his control over his behaviour was impaired." The sentiment was echoed by another psychologist, Dr. Susan Cave, who testified that Cody's actions on the day of the murders stemmed from a combination of anger, fear, and emotional overload. She diagnosed Cody with chronic depression and post-traumatic stress disorder, both rooted in the years of abuse he suffered. She testified, "I think he was overwhelmed by emotion and felt like he was in imminent danger, which doesn't mean it would happen in the next 60 seconds, but it could happen at any time." When the defence rested, the prosecution sought to counter with their own rebuttal witnesses. They called several of Paul's relatives and former colleagues to the stand, all of whom denied ever witnessing abuse. Their testimony conflicted with the accounts of 17 defence witnesses who had corroborated Cody's claims. Dr. Wade Myers, a psychologist for the prosecution, testified that Cody scored unusually high on a test for psychopathic behaviour. He described traits such as impulsivity, poor anger control, lying, and disturbed interpersonal sexual behaviours. However, under cross-examination, the defence exposed a potential bias, when Dr. Myers admitted he had been paid $14,000 by the prosecution for his evaluation. They also criticised his findings.
Were the elevated scores that you had on the hair psychopathy youth version?
Right, and Dr. Johnson's were elevated also.
Now, doctor, as it relates to that particular examination and the utilization which it's being talked about here in this courtroom today, are you familiar with the recommendations for clinical use of the hair psychopathy checklist youth version?
Yes, I am.
Then you're aware, are you not, of the warning that is given or the concerns that are raised about the consequences of providing a measure of psychopathy for use in clinical forensic practice?
Yes.
And that those concerns and the warning go to the utilization of such an examination, particularly as it relates to determining amenability to treatment of a child as an adult?
Right. Yes, I am.
Another prosecution witness, Dr. Juan Sosa, claimed that Cody showed no remorse for the murders. He recounted asking Cody why he had shot his family in the head, to which Cody reportedly replied, "That's the way we kill things on the ranch, to make sure they're dead." The prosecution then called teachers who testified that they saw no visible signs of abuse during Cody's time at school. While this testimony supported their narrative, it seemed to ignore the extensive accounts provided by other witnesses of the abuse that Cody had endured outside of school. With the presentation of evidence complete, the case moved to closing arguments. Prosecutor Janice Schuer urged the jury to reject the defence's claims of abuse in self-defense, framing the murders as cold-blooded and premeditated. She declared, "It's not a case about abuse. It's a case about cold-blooded, intentional murder perpetrated by Cody Posey." She portrayed Paul and Tyrone as loving, albeit strict parents with high expectations for their son. She speculated that Cody resented ranch life and took the opportunity to relieve himself of those expectations in life. In contrast, defense attorney Gary Mitchell delivered a passionate plea for understanding, insisting that Cody's actions were the culmination of years of relentless abuse by a family that operated as a unit to degrade and harm him. He argued, Cody killed his family because they acted as a unit, heaping physical and emotional abuse upon him for years. After both sides rested their cases, the jury retired to deliberate. For 12 tense hours, they weighted the evidence and arguments before returning with their decision. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was announced. Cody Posey was found guilty of the murder of Tyrone and Marileah, and guilty of voluntary manslaughter in the killing of Paul. As the verdict was read, Cody hung his head as tears streamed down his face. His defense attorney, Gary Mitchell, placed a comforting arm around him. Outside the courthouse, Mitchell addressed reporters, visibly emotional himself. "I just held him like I would my own son. The boy never had a chance." The sentencing phase of Cody's trial began on the 21st of February, with both sides presenting starkly opposing views on his future. Prosecutor Sandra Grisham painted a grim picture, asserting that Cody exhibited psychopathic traits that rendered him incapable of rehabilitation. She argued that society needed protected from somebody she deemed a dangerous individual. Defense attorney Gary Mitchell vehemently disagreed, portraying Cody as a victim of profound abuse, not a psychopath. In an impassioned statement, he said, "He's not a psychopath. He's an abused child who comes before this court wondering how much more has to go on in his life before he's given the same opportunities as other children and adults." The prosecution sought to have Cody sentenced as an adult, which would carry a term of more than 50 years in an adult prison. The defence, however, fought to have him sentenced as a juvenile, emphasising the potential for rehabilitation. They called on approximately 50 witnesses to support Cody, including experts, family members, and even 7 of the jurors who had convicted him. These jurors publicly expressed their hope that Cody would be sentenced as a juvenile. Dr. Robert Buser, a defence witness and psychologist, testified that Cody was very treatable for post-traumatic stress disorder, a condition he argued was central to the murders. "He can heal," he told the court. One of the most surprising voices of support came from Marileah's father, Jacob, who urged for leniency and expressed faith in Cody's potential for change. He pleaded, "If you give us a chance, we can help this boy, and I give you my word, he will never be a threat to society." The prosecution countered with their own witnesses, many of whom called for harsh punishment. Paul's brother Verlin dismissed Cody's claims of abuse and argued that his young niece, Marileah, was killed simply to silence her. With palpable anger, he stated, "I cannot believe the amount of hate and evil that can exist in one young man. Your Honour, I believe anyone that can kill his entire family and bury them in a manure pile is certainly capable of doing all sorts of heinous crimes against a perfect stranger. Therefore, I believe society should be protected from a cold-blooded murderer like Cody Posey." Similarly, Tyrone's father, Pat, described Cody as a time bomb waiting to go off.
"If the court turns this young man loose on society, he'll kill again if it suits his purpose."
Cody himself took to the stand during the sentencing phase, addressing Judge James Counts directly. His voice was steady but filled with emotion as he asked for the opportunity to rehabilitate in a juvenile facility. He said, "I can tell you right now, I will never kill again. I am confident I can be a good and model citizen." Cody expressed a desire to work on himself and prove his doubters wrong.
I want to work on myself and my problems. I want to better myself. And I would like to show people who have no faith in me that I can and will do better.
After weighing the arguments, Judge Counts sided with the defence, sentencing Cody as a juvenile. He ordered that Cody remain in state custody until he turned 21. In his ruling, Judge Counts stated that the prosecution had failed to prove that Cody was beyond rehabilitation. He acknowledged Cody's diagnosis of PTSD and noted that there was no evidence of antisocial personality traits. The decision marked a dramatic conclusion to the highly emotional case. As he was being led from the courtroom, Cody turned to his defence attorney and reassured him, "Don't worry, Mr. Mitchell. I'm not going to disappoint anybody." In the aftermath of the sentencing, the bitterness and grief within some of the family only deepened. Paul's brother, Verlin, alongside Tyrone's parents, Pat and Leona, directed their anguish towards filing a staggering $600 million lawsuit against the creators of the video game Grand Theft Auto Vice City. Their claim was bold. They argued that the game had been discovered in Cody's bedroom, and that if he had never have played the game, the murders would never have occurred. However, the court dismissed the lawsuit the following year, ruling that the game could not be held legally responsible for Cody's tragic actions. Undeterred by this setback, Verlin and the Bashams pursued another legal avenue, this time filing a wrongful death civil suit. This culminated in an $87 million judgment in their favour. Yet their attorneys described the award as largely symbolic, acknowledging the slim chances of actually collecting such a vast sum. Despite the financial outcome, the lawsuit achieved a critical objective. It legally ensured that Cody Posey could never benefit financially from the murders. In October of 2010, after serving his sentence, Cody Posey was released from the state juvenile detention facility. His release marked the beginning of a new chapter, one fraught with uncertainty and the daunting challenge of reintegration into society that had once vilified him. What became of Cody Posey after his release has never been publicised, but the controversial case serves as a reminder of the fragile line between victim and perpetrator, and the enduring need for intervention in the lives of those who suffer in silence. Well, besties, that is it for this episode of Morbidology. As always, thank you so much for listening, and I'd like to say a massive thank you to my newest supporters up on Patreon, Matt, Kim, Roseanne and Roberta. As you all know, Morbidology is a one-woman team, so the support up on Patreon seriously goes such a long way, and helps defray the costs that come with running a podcast. The link to Patreon is in the show notes if you'd like to join, and you can also search me on the app or website. I upload ad-free and early release episodes behind the scenes, photographs, and I also send out some merch and a handwritten thank you card. There's also a handful of bonus episodes of Morbidology Plus. If you didn't know, Morbidology is also now up on YouTube and the videos are presented in a documentary style, so please head on over there and hit the subscribe button. Remember to check us out at morbidology.com for more information about this episode and to read some true crime articles. Until next time, take care of yourselves, stay safe, and have an amazing week.